Welcome back to More Than Commas, the podcast where we zoom out from dollars to the bigger picture of our financial future. Now, today's hot question is, does the Bible actually command zero debt? And what we're going to do is talk a little bit about the Bible verses that are often talked about by folks like Dave Ramsey and other faith-based financial leaders. And then we're going to look at them in the broader context of how they actually appear in the Bible and what they say. To give it away a little bit, the problem isn't borrowing, it's borrowing without the ability to repay. So let's dive in. In this episode, we're going to examine how many Christian financial authors and entertainers speak about debt almost like it's a sin, or at least like it's sin adjacent. And we're going to examine together if the Bible really does support that way of thinking. Now, this episode is not for everyone, so let me give you an idea how you might participate, even if faith in Jesus and the Bible aren't your thing. Just comment below anything that surprised you. Because truth be told, the Bible has a fair amount of financial and business advice throughout. The only thing you have to do is read it. But so often, people tend to accept what other people tell them the Bible says, rather than going to the source itself. So in the spirit of referencing source material, let's take a look at this little clip from Dave, where a pastor is calling in to ask him about the biblical importance of debt.
Well, I had a question for you. I'm actually a pastor over here at a small town church. I often hear you use the phrase, the borrower is slave to the lender. And I definitely agree with that principle in many ways. But then on the other end, I noticed that when it comes to a mortgage, you are okay borrowing in that instance, which seems almost to betray that principle a little bit.
Of course, you're quoting the scriptures, Proverbs 22:7, the rich rules over the poor and the borrower is slave to the lender. And this is a biblical principle that we're violating when we say it's okay to take out a mortgage. And that's your point, and you're correct completely on that. Or when we tell people it's okay to do that. It is the only hypocritical advice we give on this show. It's the only thing we tell people it's okay to do that I never do.
You see, for people who follow Dave Ramsey and similar philosophies, and these philosophies are being taught in churches across the country, and people are being told at church that having debt is against the Word of God and is unbiblical. Now, while there are many warnings about debt, you're going to see there's nothing in the Bible that makes debt a sin or something we should avoid at all costs. So let me go through some of the major verses that people reference. Now, one of the first is Proverbs 22:7. For the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. Now, this is going to give us some Bible verses that are prescriptive, like you should do certain things, and then there's those that are descriptive, where the Bible is describing to us what it is that, or some way that the universe shows up or the way the world works. And this is certainly true, that the rich do rule over the poor. That tends to be the case, and the borrower is slave to the lender. You see, it's warning against possible freedom that could be taken from you by debt, but is certainly not an outright ban. Now, Romans 13:8. Let no balance remain outstanding except the continued debt to love one another, for whoever loves others has fulfilled the law. Now, this comes from the Greek ophelio, which has to do with an ongoing obligation. So when Paul was writing there in Romans, scholars believe it to be more like you need to keep the obligation current, not so much that all balances need to be paid off. Now we get further down, and some Old Testament stuff like Psalm 37:21, the wicked borrow and do not repay, but the righteous give generously. Now think about this for a moment with that verse. The wicked borrow and do not repay. But why didn't it just stop at the wicked borrow? And it's because borrowing is not the sin. If we don't repay it, that would be unbiblical and ungodly. And at least in Psalm said that would be wicked behavior. But if we're borrowing and paying back, that's very different. Proverbs 6, 1 through 5. My son, if you've put up security for a neighbor, free yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, like a bird from the snare of the fowler. Now, this is telling us do not co-sign on debt. As a matter of fact, that's said in Proverbs 6. It's also said in Proverbs 11:15 and Proverbs 17:18. The Bible is wildly clear that we should not be co-signing on somebody else's debt, and makes it very clear that that is our debt. Like that's how I think we should look at it, but that it is very, very big on not co-signing on debt or putting pledge or collateral up for someone else's debt. There's even one all the way out in Proverbs 22 that's in the same vein. Do not be one who shakes hands in pledge or puts up security for debts. If you lack the means to pay, your very bed will be snatched out from underneath you. Totally true. Once again, descriptive part of the Bible. It's not saying we should or should not do something, but it's absolutely saying that if you make a pledge and do not repay, you will lose everything, which is certainly the case. Now we get into Deuteronomy 15:6. For the Lord your God will bless you as he has promised, and you will lend to many nations, but will borrow from none. Now, this is talking about the nation of Israel, not necessarily us and our personal balance sheets. But what he is saying is that if he is blessing us as a nation, we should be a lender to many and not a borrower. And the Lord will open the heavens. This is Deuteronomy 28:12. The Lord will open the heavens. You will lend to many nations, but borrow from none. Again, talking about Israel. And then in Deuteronomy 28:43 through 44, the foreigners will lend to you, but you will not lend to them. Again, this is the idea of the curse of disobedience would be you'd be forever in debt. Again, speaking to Israel as a nation, not to an individual with their balance sheet. Now we get into what I think are some really neat things, especially for those of you that have accumulated some wealth. And this has to do with lending money to others, especially those who are poor. And that's Exodus 22:25 through 27. If you lend money to one of my people among you who is needy, do not treat it like a business deal. Charge no interest. Return their cloak, that would be their collateral, by sunset. And then Leviticus 25:35 through 37 says, if any of your fellow Israelites become poor, do not take interest or profit from them. You must not lend them money at interest or sell them food as a profit. So this is an instruction to the Jewish people that those people who are with them, who are poor, should, if you're going to lend to them, it shouldn't be an interest-bearing lending because they're already poor.
This episode is brought to you by Sound Financial Group. At Sound Financial, we specialize in helping clients build strong, long-term financial strategies for their retirement. If you're looking for personalized advice to help manage your wealth, visit us at sfgway.com to learn more about how we can help you achieve your goals.
All right, now we're getting back to the New Testament a little bit. And I think this is one that gets a lot of people. So we're going to take a minute here. And that's Matthew 6:24. No one can serve two masters. You cannot serve both God and money. That is 100% accurate. And what that can do is if our money is too much of our attention, and certainly getting in too much debt could make debt and money an idol. And what would be an idol in the Christian faith, for those of you not as familiar? An idol would be anything that you hold in higher regard or has more of your attention or faith or worry than your relationship with the Lord. So any idol can jump up, but debt does raise the stakes on money for it to be a problem such that it's blocking people's view and vision and relationship with God. All right, here comes another one that I think speaks to stewardship a little more. And this is one you guys have probably heard many times. Luke 14:28 through 30. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost? Otherwise, everyone will ridicule him, saying, this person began to build and wasn't able to finish. Like, you see, we should be counting the cost before we're borrowing. Are we borrowing money to be able to acquire an asset, or are we borrowing money to buy a liability that's going to go down in value? You see, if you count the costs ahead of time, that's also going to put you in a position that you're aware of your cash flow, your job security, your emergency fund. See, the problem for Dave Ramsey is this isn't something we can do really easily, in 30 seconds when somebody calls into a show or in between commercial breaks, because stewardship is a higher calling than just pay off all your debt. And when the answer is pay off all your debt, have it on the shortest term interest, all of that, especially as you start to accumulate assets and you get past the first 3 or 4 stages of his baby steps. And that's why they're called baby steps. They're meant to start people out, get people away from being broke and get them to where they have positive cash flow on their personal balance sheet. But it's when you have a little bit more sophistication, things like paying off your mortgage as quickly as possible can be proven to just be not good stewardship of your money in today's world. And so, but that's part of it. We should be counting the cost ahead of time so that we know what the impact of the borrowing is going to be on our financial life in the future. Now, the next one is 1 Corinthians 7:23. You are bought at a price. Do not become a slave to human beings. Well, that's talking a little bit about faith and the idea that we shouldn't be enslaved to this world. And you could look at it, if you wanted to be really a stickler, and say, well, the Old Testament referred to debt as a slave and do not become a slave to human beings. But again, you become a slave if it's an idol, if it has your attention. And you'll find if what you're doing is making prudent moves and counting the cost ahead of time, you don't get in anywhere near the amount of trouble you could be in getting and becoming a slave or a servant to debt. Next up, we're going to talk about this parable of the talents. And that's the story in Matthew 25:14 through 30, where Jesus is telling his disciples about a man who had to go on a trip. And he left his servants in charge of money. And they call it talents. It was like a year's worth of wages, but we'll just represent it with bags of gold. And so he gave one servant 5 bags of gold, one servant 2 bags of gold, and one servant 1 bag of gold. Now the one with 5 and the one with 2 both went out and made good use of the money and got a return. The person with 5 came back with 10. The person with 2 came back with 2 more. And what that did is it had the master just be so proud of them. And yet, this one who was scared and worried and was afraid his master would be angry if anything went wrong, he got in big trouble because all he did was go bury it in the ground and then retrieve it for his master when he came back. And one of the things the master said is you should have at least gotten usury on the money. Meaning, Jesus' story assumes like a banking system and that there would be lending and deposits and interest earned. So participating in banking and being able to get money, interest on our money, is certainly something that the Bible talks about and doesn't make wrong. And then you'll see the story of the widow's oil, and that's in 2 Kings chapter 4, verses 1 through 7. Okay. And in this, one of the lines near the end of that story that you can go through, he says, go sell the oil and pay your debts. You and your sons can live off what is left. Now, the reason he had them do that is they were poor and clearly had not made good use of debt. So he's not saying that if I bless you, immediately go pay off your debts. The higher level calling is still good stewardship. And are we making the best use of money? What I want to leave all of you with is that we're not after having people say bad things about Dave Ramsey, anything like that. In fact, I want you guys to watch this clip. In this clip, you can see Dave Ramsey is very clearly saying that debt is not a sin. He just doesn't say it every time he talks about debt. He certainly can leave people under the impression, as many other faith-based financial coaches do, leave you under the impression that it would be somehow a sin to keep the debt outstanding.
And they came out with the PPP loans. You remember the PPP loans? We're going to give businesses these loans because we told these businesses that they had to shut down because the whole world is going to freaking die. And if you go to a restaurant, you're going to kill your mother. And so you must die at home. And we shut the whole economy down, and everyone's at home sucking their thumb in abject fear, and poverty sets in, and the government comes riding in on a white horse and says, we're going to give you free money. Oh, wait, it's a loan. But it's not really a loan. It'll be a grant because we're going to forgive it as long as you maintain your payroll. I got death threats from some of you morons because I told no one to take out these PPP loans.
Instead, what we want to do is just make really good use of our money. And we did a whole episode on this, because of his zealous orientation to debt, Dave Ramsey cost many customers of his, listeners of his, tons of employees, maybe their businesses, because there was the PPP loan that was totally forgiven. And you can go back and look at his episodes, and he was just vehemently opposed. And the only thing I would love to do is see the Ramsey organization and other organizations like his just move the needle towards stewardship with your money, not just debt pay down as the primary, most important thing, because it does leave you in a spot where you might not be making the best use of your capital over time simply because you've gone into the debt payoff strategy. I'm going to give you one easy example. For many years, Dave Ramsey has said, you just get yourself a good growth mutual fund and you're going to get 10-12% return every year. Now, that in and of itself is questionable. And yet, when interest rates were low, he was saying to people things like, you should get a 15-year mortgage and then pay it down as quickly as you can. Well, the thing is, for every dollar I'm paying down on a 3% mortgage and not earning 10%, that's costing me hundreds of thousands of dollars over my lifetime. And because they don't talk about the stewardship component, it is from his own personal wounds around debt, a debt payoff only way to go. He views it as non-biblical to borrow debt, and I just don't think the Bible holds that up. So if this episode today reshaped your thinking, I'd ask you just to repost it. Feel free to clip it. We'll release a few clips and share it with anybody who follows Dave Ramsey. Because the idea isn't to smash him or cancel him. I mean, how could I? The guy is enormous. But he has helped millions of people take better control of their spending and put them in the driver's seat with their money. But what we'd love the Ramsey organization to do is to sharpen their philosophy to get closer to just biblical stewardship rather than paying off debt as the most important thing in somebody's life. Well, that's it for this episode. Now go back to living a great life.